"You'll never be anyone, Mariana. Nobody wants to see a girl like you dancing." Carla's cruel voice rang out like a knife through the young girl's heart. The crowd of children around laughed, pointing at Mariana, who was wearing her patched sneakers and faded dress, marks of her humble life in Carmópolis. Mariana was breathing hard, holding back tears as she clenched her fists. She didn't want to cry in front of them. Her grandmother always told her, "Never let them see you weak, my granddaughter. Show them who you are in the dance." Suddenly, one of the rich girls threw a handful of dirt on Mariana's feet, dirtying her already worn-out sneakers. "Go on, dance now. Show us how a beggar dances." Carla taunted again, drawing more laughter from the group. Mariana lowered her eyes to the dirty sneakers, feeling the heat of shame rise to her face. Then, without saying a word, she pushed her messy hair away from her face, lifted her chin and began to spin. It was a small movement, but charged with emotion. She spun around as if it were the last thing she would ever do. The laughter subsided. Even the children who had been insulting her stopped, impressed by the smoothness of her movements. When Mariana stopped dancing, panting and with tears finally escaping her eyes, the small crowd dispersed, embarrassed or unable to understand what she was feeling. But Carla still found the strength to shout, "Don't think that changes anything. You're still a nobody." Mariana stood alone in the field, her eyes burning with tears. At that moment, she promised herself that no one would ever make fun of her dream again. As the afternoon fell, she ran home, where her grandmother, Dona Clarice, was waiting for her with a kind smile. Mariana collapsed into her arms. "I just wanted them to understand, Grandma. I just wanted them to let me dance." Clarice smoothed her granddaughter's hair, whispering, "You will dance, my love. And one day, they'll have no choice but to applaud you." That would be the day that would change everything, even if Mariana didn't know it yet. The next day, Mariana was in the backyard of the small wooden house, barefoot and with the hem of her dress patched up to her knees. The dirt floor was her dance floor. The scorching sun barely seemed to bother her as she rehearsed the steps she had invented on her own, based on ballet videos she managed to watch when she visited the town's public library. She moved her arms delicately, her fingers drawing lines in the air, while her feet slid on the rough floor. Each turn brought a mixture of strength and fragility, as if she was fighting against the world to show her soul. However, in a moment of carelessness, he tripped over a stone. The fall was quick, and the sharp pain in her knee made her eyes fill with tears. "No, Mariana, not now," she muttered to herself as she wiped the blood off with the hem of her dress. She looked up at the sky and took a deep breath. There was no time for weakness. On the other side of the yard, an unknown figure watched. Dona Clarice was sewing on the veranda when a customer, a distinguished-looking woman with a tired expression, arrived with a bundle of clothes to adjust. As she waited, her eyes were drawn to the movement in the yard. "Who is she?" the woman asked, her voice laden with curiosity. Clarice looked up, noticing her customer's interest. "She's my granddaughter, Mariana. She dreams of being a dancer, but—" the grandmother paused, hesitating to mention the obstacles the girl faced. "But what?" insisted the woman, without taking her eyes off Mariana. "But we're poor, and nobody believes her," Clarice replied resignedly. "They think that dancing isn't something for those born here. But she doesn't give up." The woman, who until then had kept a reserved posture, stepped forward, fascinated. Her eyes, full of melancholy, met Clarice's. "Dancing isn't just for those with money," she said. "It's for people with heart. And this girl, she has more soul in one step than I've seen on many stages in the capital." Clarice frowned, confused. "Do you understand dance?" The woman sighed, her trembling hands touching the wood of the balcony. "I was a dancer once. But that was a long time ago. At that moment, Mariana, panting and dirty with dirt, noticed the stranger looking at her. With a mixture of shyness and curiosity, she took a hesitant step towards the balcony. "Grandma, who is she?" Clarice smiled gently. "A client. And she seems to have enjoyed watching you dance." The woman gave her an encouraging smile. "You have talent, young lady. But talent needs to be molded. If you accept, I can help." Mariana stood still, the words echoing in her mind. Someone believed in her. Someone saw more than just a poor, dreamy girl. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. "I accept," said Mariana, her voice firm despite the emotion that overflowed. From that moment on, her life would never be the same. Early the next morning, Mariana was in the yard, her feet still scarred from the previous day's tireless dancing. With a stick in hand, she drew lines in the dirt, creating a small imaginary stage. In spite of everything, the flame of his dream was still burning, even if it seemed small in the face of the difficulties. "Focus on your center, girl. Yes, raise your head." The woman's voice, firm and gentle at the same time, interrupted Mariana's thoughts. The former dancer, who had introduced herself as Isadora, was now standing in the yard, watching her with attentive, experienced eyes. "You've come, really?" asked Mariana, incredulous, as if hoping that this help was just a passing dream. "Of course I came," Isadora replied, crossing her arms. "I said I'd help you, and I want to see how far your passion can take you." Mariana looked at her grandmother, who was smiling as she finished sewing in the shade of the veranda. It didn't seem real. "Let's start with what you've got," said Isadora, gesturing to Mariana's sneakers, which were almost unstuck. The girl turned red, ashamed of her condition, but Isadora knelt on the ground and took the shoes in her hands. "Do you think that's what matters? It's not the shoes that make a dancer, girl. It's the heart." Mariana smiled shyly and began to dance under her mentor's watchful eye. It was a dance full of emotion, but Isadora immediately noticed the technical flaws. She interrupted the girl with a firm gesture. "You feel the music, but you don't control your body. That's something we can work on, but it's going to be difficult. Are you willing to do whatever it takes?" Mariana nodded vigorously, although she had no idea what was coming. The next few days were a mixture of euphoria and exhaustion. Isadora spared no effort. She used poles to align Mariana's posture, taught balance by improvising ballet bars with old furniture from the house, and made the girl repeat the steps until her legs shook with fatigue. "Again, Mariana." "But I can't take it anymore, Mrs. Isadora. Anyone who wants to dance with their soul cannot surrender to physical pain. Get up." Despite her stern tone, Mariana saw a determination in her mentor's eyes that made her keep going. Every day, she felt stronger, more capable. One of those afternoons, while Isadora was correcting her steps, Dona Clarice rushed in, holding a local newspaper in her trembling hands. "You won't believe it." "Something wrong, Grandma?" asked Mariana, worried. "No, my dear. It's about you." Clarice showed the newspaper with the page open to a prominent advertisement. Great dance competition in the capital. 3 scholarships available for young talents. Mariana's eyes lit up, but fear quickly took over her countenance. I can't take part in this. Look who's competing. Rich people who have been dancing for years. If you dance like you did this morning, you really won't make it," Isadora cut in frankly. "But if you dance with everything that's inside you, Mariana, no one will be able to stop you." "But what about the clothes? What about transportation? And the—" Mariana started to list the barriers, but Isadora interrupted again. "One thing at a time, young lady. You train, your grandmother and I will take care of the rest. Now, Show us what you've learned so far. Mariana swallowed, but something inside her told her that this was the moment she had been waiting for since she had started dancing. Even so, she could hardly imagine the size of the struggle that lay ahead. The next day, Mariana sat at the small kitchen table while Mrs. Clarice cut pieces of fabric in silence. The lines on her grandmother's face seemed deeper that morning, as if they carried the weight of a decision. "Grandma, do you think I really can?" Mariana broke the silence, her voice low, almost a whisper. Mrs. Clarice stopped her work, looked at her granddaughter and held her hands tightly. "I don't think the world is ready for you yet, my little one. But that doesn't matter. You'll show them what courage is." However, while Mariana was filled with determination, an unexpected problem arose. During training that afternoon, a wrong move caused her to twist her ankle. Isadora, who was watching the practice, ran over to help her. "Mariana, are you all right?" "I'm fine. I just need to keep going." The girl tried to get up, but her body wouldn't comply. "You can't dance with your ankle like that," Isadora insisted, but Mariana burst into tears. "I can't stop now. This competition is my chance. It's all I have." The girl's words echoed in the yard. For a moment, silence overtook the room. Dona Clarice, who was watching from afar, approached with a bag of ice. "You're going to stop today, Mariana. It's not giving up, it's taking care of yourself so that you're ready for tomorrow. A bird can't fly with broken wings, my love." Even though she was upset, Mariana accepted. She spent the next few days watching dance videos and studying music, while Isadora worked on adapting her movements, taking into account the limitation of her ankle. Finally, the big day arrived. Mariana and Dona Clarice left home at dawn, with Isadora in the back seat of an old car borrowed from a neighbor. The streets of the capital were vastly different from those of Carmópolis. Mariana was dazzled by the tall buildings and bright lights, but her anxiety soon took over. "I don't belong here," she muttered, looking at the contestants entering the competition venue. They carried designer bags, wore shiny clothes, and their confident conversations were a far cry from hers. "You belong wherever your heart takes you, Mariana," said Isadora, adjusting the makeshift ribbons on the girl's sneakers. Inside the ballroom, the nervousness only increased. The contestants danced with impeccable technique, each move seemingly straight out of a manual. Mariana watched, feeling small, but then remembered Isadora's words. "It's not the shoes that make the dancer, it's the heart." Finally, it was her turn. When she announced her name, the silence was deafening. Mariana took to the stage with hesitant steps. The judges looked her up and down, apparently already underestimating her performance before it had even begun. The music began. It was a simple melody, but full of emotion. Mariana closed her eyes and let the rhythm fill every fiber of her body. Her movements were her own creations, a mixture of classical ballet and folk dances that she had invented in her backyard. The audience, initially indifferent, began to pay attention. Each turn seemed to carry the weight of her story. Each leap was a silent cry against the humiliations she had suffered. When the song came to an end, Mariana was on her knees in the center of the stage, panting and shedding tears. For a few seconds, silence dominated the room. Then the sound of timid clapping grew until it exploded into rapturous applause. Mariana looked at the judges and saw something she had never expected: emotion. As she descended from the stage, she felt the stares of the other contestants, but this time they weren't contemptuous. They were impressed. Isadora was waiting for her at the exit with a discreet smile. "I told you that you had something that no one else has." Mrs. Clarice, her eyes watering, pulled Mariana into an embrace. "You danced like no one else ever has, my granddaughter." Now we have to wait for the result." The hall was filled with murmurs after Mariana's performance. Sitting on the side of the stage, her legs still shaking from the effort, she tried to regulate her breathing. Her heart was pounding as if it wanted to leap out of her chest, but not because of the dance. It was the waiting. The silence between the end of the performance and the judge's decision seemed like an eternity. "Did you see how they turned out, Grandma?" Mariana asked, her voice almost a whisper, as if she was afraid of breaking the spell. "I saw, my little one. And they weren't ready for what you brought," replied Mrs. Clarice, her eyes shining with pride and restrained tears. Across the room, the contestants were whispering. Mariana heard fragments of the conversations. She didn't even have a presentation outfit. But, "Did you see what she did? It was different. It was real." Mariana lowered her head, trying to ignore it. She felt Isadora's hand rest firmly on her shoulder. "You were extraordinary. But remember, dance is like life. You never know the outcome until you face the end with courage." The judges continued talking to each other, gesticulating and jotting down notes. The head of the panel, a gray-haired man with a hard expression, seemed particularly intrigued. He glanced at Mariana from time to time, his gaze somewhere between serious and curious. Meanwhile, the tension grew inside Mariana. What did that look mean? What if he was arguing that she didn't have enough technique? What if? "I won't make it, Grandma. They'll choose the ones with the nice clothes, the ones who look the best," she said, her voice laced with insecurity. "You've already achieved something greater, my child. You've shown the world that no matter what anyone says, your dream is stronger than any criticism. No one can take that away from you," Clarice replied, holding her granddaughter's face with affection. Finally, the microphone was turned on. The head of the jury stood up, asking for attention. "Before we announce the winners, I want to congratulate everyone. You've each brought something unique to this stage, but only 3 of you can go forward to the scholarships." The room fell completely silent. The first name announced was that of one of the favorites. Mariana recognized him as the boy who had rehearsed with a professional group on the morning of the competition. The second name was a girl who had given a technically flawless performance. "That's it," Mariana thought. "I knew it wasn't enough." The judge cleared his throat before announcing the third name. "And the last winner, who has moved us deeply with a unique performance, is Mariana Oliveira." For a moment, the world stopped. Mariana heard her name echo in the room, but it seemed impossible that it was real. Isadora was the first to react, clapping her hands while smiling proudly. Mrs. Clarice was crying openly, covering her mouth with her hands. "Mariana, it's you!" cried Isadora, lightly shaking the girl, who was still paralyzed. Mariana stood up, her legs shaking, and walked slowly to the stage, where the judges were waiting for her. The head of the panel held out a certificate to her. "You didn't just dance. You told a story. And stories are what touch the soul. Congratulations." His words resonated in her mind. That was it. She had touched people's souls. It wasn't just technique. It wasn't just what it looked like on the outside. It was what came from within. When she came down from the stage, she was greeted by a tight hug from Dona Clarice. "You did it, my granddaughter. You did it." But even in the midst of her euphoria, Mariana noticed a detail. As Isadora watched her from afar, there was something in her mentor's eyes, a hidden sadness, an untold story. But before she could ask, she was swept away by the crowd of hugs and congratulations. The applause still echoed in the hall as Mariana and her small entourage left the competition venue. The capital's night was illuminated by street lamps and glittering shop windows. so far removed from the silent darkness of Carmópolis that it seemed like another world. Mariana held the certificate in both hands, as if afraid it would disappear. "You've made history, young lady," said Isadora, with a rare and sincere smile. But there was something else in her voice, a weight, perhaps nostalgia. "Now can I really study ballet?" Mariana asked, her voice full of hope. "Yes, my little one. With this scholarship, the world of dance is open to you," replied Mrs. Clarice, wiping away the tears that still insisted on falling. However, as they walked down the street towards the car, Mariana began to notice the curious looks on people's faces. Some faces looked familiar. Others were filled with something she couldn't identify. Admiration or, perhaps, regret. "Mariana!" A voice called out to her, and when she turned around, her heart raced. It was Carla, the girl who had humiliated her so many times in Carmópolis. She was there, together with her mother, who looked as uncomfortable as her daughter. Carla approached slowly, her face flushed with embarrassment. I saw you dancing," she began, her voice hesitant. "I just wanted to apologize for everything I said. I was wrong." Mariana stood motionless, the world seeming to spin around her. Were Carla's words sincere, or were they just the result of seeing her success? She didn't know how to react. On the one hand, the pain of the humiliation was still there. On the other, she felt it wasn't worth carrying that weight. "Thank you," she replied with a shy smile, but said no more. "Are you all right, Mariana?" Isadora asked as the girl walked in silence to the car. "I'm fine. I just don't know what to do with it all." The journey back was silent, but Mariana's heart was pounding. When she got home, she put the certificate next to her bed and lay down, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. The feeling of victory was still surreal, but there was one thing she couldn't get out of her mind: Isadora's gaze. The next morning, Isadora showed up early, as usual, but carrying a worn wooden box. "Before we start thinking about your move to school, I want you to take a look at this." Inside the box were old newspaper clippings, black and white photos, and a pair of sneakers very similar to the ones Mariana was wearing, but extremely worn. Mariana looked at the objects and then at Isadora, confused. "These sneakers," began Isadora, her voice full of emotion, "belonged to the most important person in my life. They were the beginning and the end of everything for me." Mariana touched the shoes carefully, feeling the weight of the story they carried. Who was she? Isadora took a deep breath, as if deciding how much truth to reveal. "An incredible dancer. She had a soul like yours. She danced not just with her body, but with her heart. But because of the wrong choices and the wrong people, her career was taken away from her." Isadora's eyes were watery, but her expression was firm. "She lost everything, Mariana. Everything. And she was never able to fully recover." Mariana felt a shiver run through her body. For a moment, she wanted to ask more, but something in Isadora's posture made her hesitate. It was as if that story was loaded with a secret that the woman wasn't yet ready to reveal. "These sneakers," said Mariana, holding them carefully. "Why are you showing me these now?" "Because I want you to remember where you came from and where you can go. I want you to know that dance can be a gift, but also a burden if not used wisely." Mariana nodded, feeling a new weight in her heart. She didn't know what else the journey had in store for her, but she knew that her story was just beginning. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Mariana now had to prepare for the move to the capital, where she would begin her journey at the renowned ballet school. The small house in Carmópolis seemed more cramped than ever with so many things to pack, but at the same time, the farewell weighed heavily on their hearts. Mrs. Clarice spent whole nights sewing simple but elegant clothes, so that Mariana would have something worthy to wear to class. "You'll be the prettiest girl in this place, no matter what anyone says," she said, hiding her tiredness behind a smile. Isadora, for her part, devoted all her remaining time to perfecting Mariana's steps. "You're going to face much bigger challenges now," she warned, correcting every little mistake in her movements. "Everyone there is excellent. The difference will be the emotion you put into each step." On the morning of her departure, Mariana said goodbye to her home with a tightness in her chest. The simplicity of that place, the smell of the earth in the yard where she trained, everything seemed so small and yet so immense. The old car, borrowed again from a neighbor, took Mariana, her grandmother and Isadora to the bus station. The journey to the capital seemed like a leap into the unknown. Mariana gazed out of the window, her eyes fixed on the gradually changing landscape, reflecting on everything she had left behind. When they arrived at the school, Mariana was breathless. The building was imposing, with huge windows that sparkled in the sun and a well-kept garden. Young dancers hurried past, chatting in confident tones, many of them wearing designer clothes. "Welcome to your new world," said Isadora, as she watched the girls' reaction. Mariana tried to hold her head high, but her nervousness was undeniable. She knew it wouldn't be easy to adapt. The first few days of class were exhausting. Mariana quickly realized that the other students' technique was far superior to her own. Although she received praise for the emotion she conveyed, the teachers didn't hesitate to point out her technical shortcomings. "That's unacceptable, Miss Oliveira," said one of the instructors during a class. "You have soul, but you need precision. Emotion can't sustain pirouettes." Mariana felt the weight of the criticism. At night, as she retired to the small room she shared with her grandmother, she finally let the tears escape. "What if I'm not good enough, Grandma?" she asked, her voice breaking. Mrs. Clarice, always firm, answered calmly, "You got here because you're special, Mariana. Every step you take is a piece of your heart. Don't let doubt rob you of that." Despite the difficulties, Mariana clung to the promise she had made to herself on the day of her humiliation in Carmópolis. She would show the world that her dream was bigger than any criticism. One particularly difficult evening, while training alone in the school's large empty hall, she was surprised by Isadora. "You're not going to give up now, are you?" asked her mentor, her voice echoing in the silent space. "I feel like I'm falling behind," Mariana admitted. "They have everything. Coaches, resources, experience. I just have will." "You have more than that," said Isadora, handing her something that was wrapped in an old cloth. When Mariana opened it, she found the worn-out sneakers that her mentor had shown her a few days earlier. "Wear these to your next rehearsal. Remember who you are." Mariana remained silent, holding the sneakers as if they were an amulet. There was something about them that made her feel more connected to dance than ever. The next morning, when she went on stage for the dress rehearsal, she felt a new kind of energy. It no longer mattered what anyone else thought or what they had. She had something that no one could take away, the heart she put into every movement. When she finished her dance, the room was silent. Teachers and students watched her with wide eyes. For the first time, Mariana felt that she had earned their respect, but she still didn't understand the full impact of what she had done. On her way out, she bumped into Isadora. "You danced with everything you had. It was extraordinary." But again, Mariana noticed something in her mentor's eyes. A sadness, a story that was still hidden. "Why do you care so much about me, Mrs. Isadora?" The mentor hesitated for a moment, but looked away. "Because you remind me of someone I loved very much." Mariana didn't ask any more, but something told her that there was much more to the story. The next few days brought a mixture of tension and overcoming for Mariana. She started wearing the old sneakers that Isadora had given her at every rehearsal, feeling as if they carried an invisible force, something that connected her to her essence. Her colleagues, who had previously looked at her with disdain, now watched with curiosity and even silent admiration. One day, after a practice presentation, the school principal, Madame Elena, asked to speak to Mariana. "Your performance has been impressive, Miss Oliveira," she said, as she walked through the hall with elegant steps. "But you know that dance requires more than emotion. Technique is what sustains us on the most demanding stages." Mariana swallowed. She knew that her technical shortcomings were a constant shadow. "I'm trying to improve, ma'am," she replied humbly. "I know you are. That's why I want you to take part in a school gala. It's in 2 weeks, and it's your chance to show everyone, and yourself, what you're really capable of." Mariana felt the ground open up under her feet. A gala performance? She could hardly believe she had been chosen for something so grand. But at the same time, anxiety enveloped her like a suffocating veil. That evening, as she shared the news with her grandmother and Isadora, she felt torn between joy and fear. What if I'm not good enough? What if I ruin everything? "We all feel afraid, young lady," said Isadora, as she tidied her grey hair. "The difference lies in who lets fear win and who turns it into strength. You are strong. Don't forget that." With the support of her grandmother and mentor, Mariana embarked on even more rigorous training. Isadora spent extra hours helping her refine every detail of the choreography. "This dance needs to tell your story," said her mentor, as she adjusted the movements. "Each step should be a reflection of who you are. If you don't dance with your soul, you'll just be another dancer on stage. And you were born to be unique." Mariana gave herself completely. In the hall, she repeated the steps until her feet bled. At home, she relived the memories of Carmópolis and turned them into movements. She knew she wasn't just dancing. She was fighting to prove that dreams, even the most improbable ones, can be realized. On the day of the gala, the school theater was packed. Mariana, wearing a simple costume fitted by her grandmother, looked at the stage with trembling hands. "You're ready," said Isadora, putting her hands on the girl's shoulders. "Remember, the stage is yours. Dance for yourself, and the rest will follow." When her name was announced, Mariana took a deep breath and entered the stage. The lights blinded her for a moment, but the music started, and with it, everything disappeared. Every movement she made seemed to carry the weight of her memories. The dirt field where she started, the looks of contempt in Carmópolis, the tears of frustration and the smiles of victory. Every turn, every jump, was a page in her story. When the song ended, Mariana was on her knees, her chest rising and falling with difficulty. For a moment, the theater was completely silent. Then a wave of applause swept the place. In the audience, Madame Elena stood up and gave a standing ovation. Teachers and students did the same, many with tears in their eyes. Mariana came down from the stage still ecstatic, but what awaited her was something she couldn't have predicted. Isadora was there, her eyes watering, but there was something else in her expression, a secret that seemed about to explode. "You were magnificent," said Isadora, her voice breaking. "But now we need to talk." "About what?" Mariana asked, confused. "About why you're here, and what it means." The applause still echoed in Mariana's mind as she followed Isadora through the corridors of the theater. Her mentor was visibly tense, which only added to the girl's anxiety. When they reached an empty room at the back, Isadora closed the door carefully, as if what she was about to say needed to be protected from the world. "Mariana, there's something you need to know. Something I've kept for a long time." The woman's voice trembled slightly, but her eyes were firm. "What about?" Mariana asked, holding her sneakers in her hands, still panting from the presentation. Isadora took a deep breath and began, I said I cared about you because you remind me of someone. That wasn't the whole truth. I care about you because you're connected to a person who was everything to me." Mariana frowned, not understanding. "Connected? What do you mean?" Isadora approached, putting her hands on the girl's shoulders. "Your mother, Mariana. She was a dancer. One of the best I've ever known." Isadora's words fell on Mariana like thunder. My mother? But my grandmother never told me about it. Clarice didn't want you to know. She thought it would be a burden for you to carry the weight of your mother's past. But now that you've come this far, it's time you knew the truth." Mariana felt her legs weaken and looked for a chair to sit on. What happened to her? Why didn't anyone tell me this before? Isadora closed her eyes for a moment, as if preparing to relive painful memories. "Your mother, Elisa, was an extraordinary dancer. She had a free soul, just like you. But the world of dance can be cruel. She faced jealousy, betrayal, and she was betrayed by the person she trusted the most." "What? Who?" Mariana asked, her voice breaking. Isadora hesitated before continuing. "Your father." Mariana felt the air escape from her lungs. "My father? But he died before I was born." "Not exactly," said Isadora, her eyes filled with sadness. "He disappeared from Elisa's life when she needed him most. Elisa was pregnant with you, but before she could face the world alone, she had an accident during a rehearsal. She was never able to fully recover. That's what took her off the stage and back to Carmópolis, where Clarice looked after her until the last day." Tears streamed down Mariana's face. The story was heavier than she could ever have imagined. "So, is that why my grandmother never wanted to talk about my mother? Because she suffered so much?" "Yes," Isadora answered with a sigh. "And also because, deep down, she was afraid that you would follow in the same footsteps and face the same challenges. But you're different, Mariana. You're stronger than any obstacle." Mariana was silent for a long moment, absorbing the revelation. "How well did you know her?" "She was my student," Isadora admitted. "And more than that, my friend. I saw her shine and fall, and I could never forgive myself for not doing more for her. When I saw you, dancing in that yard, it was like seeing Elisa again. That's why I decided to help." The pieces of the puzzle were finally starting to fit together, but Mariana felt as if there was something more, something that Isadora hadn't yet said. "What about my father? Do you know where he is?" Isadora looked away, which confirmed Mariana's suspicions. "I didn't want to tell you this now, but yes, I know where he is. Does he know about me?" "I'm not sure. He's become someone powerful in the dance world, but what happened between him and his mother has completely alienated him. I don't know what he'll say if he hears about you." Mariana felt a mixture of anger and sadness. "I don't need him. I got this far without him. I just want to be myself, not what he or anyone else expects of me." Isadora smiled, although her eyes were still watery. "That, young lady, is exactly what your mother would have said." The revelation about her mother and her devastating past hung over Mariana's mind like a whirlwind of emotions. That night, lying on her bed in the school dormitory, she stared at the ceiling, tears silently flowing. "Why didn't anyone tell me before?" she muttered to herself. The next day, Isadora insisted on taking her to a special place. It was an old theater in the center of the capital, a place Isadora described as where everything began and ended. The walls of the theater were covered with faded posters of past shows. In one corner, a partially torn poster caught Mariana's eye. "That's her, isn't it? My mother." Mariana asked, touching the image of a smiling young woman in a perfect ballet pose. Isadora nodded, her eyes filled with tears. That was her last show. After that, everything changed. As they walked across the empty stage, Isadora stopped abruptly and turned to Mariana. "You need to know, Mariana. Your father. He'll be here today." Mariana felt her heart race. "Here? Why?" "Because he's the director of the gala show that will close the school semester. He's here to choose who will perform with the main company next year." Mariana stood motionless, the weight of the revelation almost knocking her over. "And you didn't think this was something I should have known beforehand?" "I didn't know how you would react. But now you need to be ready. He probably doesn't know who you are, and maybe it's better this way. For now." Mariana took a deep breath. Part of her wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but another part knew that this would only distract her from her goal. "All right," she said, her voice firm. "If he doesn't know, I'll make sure he sees who I am on stage." That night, the theater was packed. The gala show was the most anticipated event of the year, with company directors, critics and journalists in the audience. Mariana was getting ready backstage, Isadora's old sneakers on her feet. When the moment arrived, she took to the stage. The lights were blinding, but she didn't care. The whole world disappeared when the music started. Unlike anything she had ever done, Mariana mixed technique, passion and emotion in a way that seemed to defy the laws of gravity. Every step was a tribute to the mother she never knew, the grandmother who always believed in her and the mentor who guided her there. At the end of the performance, the silence that preceded the applause was almost unbearable. When the audience finally burst into applause, Mariana saw something that took her completely by surprise. In the front row, a tall, gray-haired man was standing, his eyes fixed on her. His face was a mixture of shock and recognition. It was him, her father. As the curtains closed, Mariana felt her legs go weak, but before she could pull herself together, Isadora appeared at her side. "He knows now. I saw it in his eyes. Will he want to talk to me?" Mariana asked, her voice trembling. "I have no doubt," Isadora replied, and she was right. Moments later, the man appeared backstage. He hesitated when he saw her, as if he were facing a ghost. You're Mariana, aren't you?" "I am," she replied, her voice charged with emotion. "I didn't know. I had no idea," he tried to explain, but Mariana interrupted him. "I got here without you. I don't need any apologies or explanations. I just want you to know that I am who I am because of my mother, my grandmother, and dancing." The man nodded, with tears in his eyes. "She would be very proud of you, just as I am now." The conversation was brief, but the impact was profound. Mariana felt that, for the first time, she had closed a cycle she hadn't even known existed. That night, as she looked out of the window at the city lights, she thought about everything she had faced. The girl humiliated in the backyard of Carmópolis was now the young woman who shone on stage. And that was just the beginning. 10 years later, Mariana was a household name in the dance world. Her unique style, which combined impeccable technique and visceral emotion, had conquered international stages. Now, at 22, she was the prima ballerina of one of the most prestigious ballet companies in the world. That evening, Mariana was in Paris, ready to premiere a choreography she had created herself, inspired by her mother's story. Her old sneakers, now kept like an amulet in a glass case, were a constant reminder of her roots. As the photographer's flashes illuminated her arrival at the theater, she carried the same determined smile that had accompanied her since her days in Carmópolis. Backstage, before going on stage, Mariana received an unexpected message from Isadora. Although her mentor had moved away from the spotlight in recent years, they kept in regular contact. "Today, you're closer to Elisa than ever," the message read. "Dance as if she were by your side." Mariana closed her eyes, feeling the words echo in her soul. When she took to the stage, the first chords of the music filled the theater. The choreography was a powerful narrative of loss, overcoming, and love. With each movement, Mariana told her mother's story, from her first steps as a dancer to the moment life took her back to Carmópolis. The performance was a triumph. When the curtains closed, the audience was on their feet, applauding deafeningly. Backstage, however, Mariana was surprised by an unexpected visitor. Her father. Although they had kept in touch sporadically over the years, he had never been to one of her shows. "I couldn't miss tonight," he said, with a shy smile. "Thank you for coming," Mariana replied, with a gentler tone than she had expected. "You impress me every day." "Your mother would have been as proud of you as I am," he said, holding out a small package. Mariana opened the gift and found a golden reliquary with a photo of her mother inside. "I've kept this for many years," she explained. "I think it's yours now." Holding the reliquary, Mariana felt a warmth invade her chest. "I'll keep it as a symbol of everything that brought us here." The evening marked more than a professional triumph. It was a moment of healing, a strengthened bond between father and daughter, now united by memories and hope for the future. A few months later, Mariana returned to Carmópolis for a special performance. It was a personal project, to bring dance to her hometown, where it all began. The event would take place outdoors, in the same dirt field where she used to practice as a child. Donor Clarice, now in frail health, was the first to be consulted. "I always knew you would light up this place, my granddaughter. It's an honor to see it happen." When the day arrived, the small town was unrecognizable. A stage had been set up, and the people who once despised her were now there to see her shine. Children ran through the fields, inspired by her story, and mothers commented on how Mariana had become a symbol of hope for everyone. Isadora was also there, sitting in the front row. Although the years had left their mark on her face, her gaze was still firm and proud. The performance was a love letter to the city, her grandmother, her mother, and her mentor. Mariana finished her dance kneeling in the center of the stage, looking up at the sky, as if she were talking directly to Elisa. When the show ended, Mariana was surrounded by children asking for autographs and photos. One of them, a little girl with curly hair and sparkling eyes, held her hand and asked, "Can I be like you one day?" Mariana knelt down, looking directly at the girl. "You can be whoever you want, as long as you believe in your dream and never give up." The evening ended with a celebration that united the whole town. Mariana felt, for the first time, that the cycle was complete. No matter how far away she went, Carmópolis would always be the place where it all began. And as she danced under the starry sky, surrounded by those she loved most, she knew that her story wasn't just about her. It was about all the people who, like her, had a dream too big to be contained in a small place.